Your support helps us bring you programs you love. Go to wyomingpbs.org, click on Support, and become a sustaining member or an annual member. It's easy and secure. Thank you.
A Cheyenne tech company, woman-owned and translating the world one step at a time. Language.io and its co-owner, Heather Morgan Schumaker, on the next Wyoming Chronicle. What if I asked you a question in Japanese or German or French? How possibly could you know what it is that I need to know? That's where Language.io comes in. It's a high-tech company, and it's headquartered right here in Wyoming. That's rare. Even rarer is that it's owned by a woman, Heather Morgan Schumaker. We'll visit with her in just a little bit. Also, one of its primary investors is also a woman, Dr. Christina Stefka, and that's where we'll begin. She thought Language.io was a good idea. Turns out, she might be right. Dr. Christina Stefka now joins us on Wyoming Chronicle. She's an investor in Language.io. She's a physician that practices here in Cheyenne. And Dr. Stefka, why Language.io? Why a tech company? And why a woman-owned company? Why did you invest in Language.io?
Well, I think the first reason that I chose Language.io is I think it's a phenomenal idea. It fills a very specific niche in the marketplace that hasn't, to my amazement, been filled as far as I know. And you know, furthermore, on top of that, it is a woman-owned company. You know, I think that women often somewhat get the short shrift in business because historically the financial and social structures of the business world have been male-dominated, and sometimes women's ideas, even though they have equal or even greater merit, may not get the time and the energy and the money behind it that they need to be successful.
Does a tech company scare you, investing in a tech company?
Absolutely, because it's kind of out of my realm of knowledge. But again, when Heather and Karina were able to explain to me exactly what they do, it sounded like such a great idea to me. And they were able to make me understand what they do, even though it's incredibly technical and I don't understand the details. You know, I do understand the big picture level what they do. And I just thought it was such a great idea, and I really believe that they have the skills and the knowledge to carry it forward.
Dr. Stefka, you're also a mother. Mm-hmm. Tell us how you met.
Yeah, well, actually Heather and I met because our children go to school together, and our daughters had a science fair project actually that they agreed to do together, and so Heather and I brought them to the library, and it was just fortunate circumstance that we got to know each other that way.
And now the future. How long ago did you invest, and what's the future with your relationship with Language.io?
Mm-hmm. Well, I invested, it's been about a year ago. And Language.io is going through a time where they're expanding. That's why they needed some angel investors in order to kind of grow their company to get more exposure out in the marketplace. I recently went to kind of a update that they had where Karina, Heather's partner from Boston, flew in, and they kind of updated the investors as to where they are, and they have grown significantly in the year. Thanks in part to the money that I put in.
So you like what you see?
Absolutely.
Dr. Stefka, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And now we'll meet Heather Morgan Schumaker. She's a co-owner of Language.io. It's her job to make sure her company can answer the questions. That's in any language, whether it's Japanese, Mandarin, French, or German. Any questions in any language. That's what Heather Schumaker wants her company to do. Heather Morgan Schumaker is the co-owner and co-founder of Language.io, a Cheyenne tech company that's in Wyoming. Heather, how did you get the ideas for what it is that you're doing today? And then we'll go on from there.
Sure. So I was working at another software company actually for a large corporate software company of 30,000 people. And the job was great. It was in the Denver Tech Center, but I was having to commute at least once a week into the office. And it's a 2.5-hour commute from here. That's 5 hours driving a day. Even though I only had to do it one day a week, it was a lot. So I was really looking to do something different at that point. The job was great, but I had no interest in moving down to Denver. And previously, I had worked with my current partner, Karna Kulvik, for another startup, and it was focused on software localization. And at the time, we thought it would be great to at some point in the future establish a business together if the opportunity ever arose.
Localization means in different languages generally, is that true?
Yeah, taking, in this case, it was taking companies' software and making it capable of supporting different languages, and then translating the resources, the text and the images that are pulled into the software into the languages that it needs to support.
So now here we are with Language I/O.
Yeah.
What was the genesis of that idea then?
So I decided to go ahead and start my own technology company, Cheyenne Technology, which is focused really on web development here in Cheyenne. We do websites for folks all over town, and that's still a great business. But my current partner, Karina, she was working for a localization company, and one of their clients was SurveyMonkey, and SurveyMonkey had approached her and said, we have all of our help articles in this client relationship management platform. We're going to 12 languages, and we have no way, well, it will be very costly for us to manually get all of our thousands of help articles out of this client relationship management platform, get them translated, and then get them back in. Can you automate that process for us? So Karina's company wasn't in a position to do that, but she knew I had a software company. And she said, Heather, is this something that you can take on? And so I started talking to her about it, and we thought, well, yeah, this is something that we can do for SurveyMonkey, but it's probably a viable product for many companies that have their knowledge base or all of their help content in a client relationship management platform. And by the way, we abbreviate that CRM, just to make it easier to say, in a CRM with no easy means of getting all of those articles translated, no way of automating that process. And so I went ahead and developed that software for SurveyMonkey with the idea of productizing it later. And SurveyMonkey loved it. It saved them hundreds of thousands of dollars. And at that point, Karina and I decided to go ahead and move forward with a company called Language I/O that was going to be a product company focused on providing multilingual customer support.
So what that means is I'm a customer of a piece of software and I speak Mandarin.
Right.
But the support specialist may speak English or French.
Right.
So I can type my question in Mandarin.
Yep.
I can then have it translated to the support specialist. He can type in his native language and have it translated back to Mandarin, and we can communicate.
Exactly.
And this happens in near real time.
It can, yes. So basically, if I'm the support person, I only speak English, and you're speaking Mandarin, I can respond to your questions in English, but you, as far as you're concerned, it's all happening in Mandarin. So a support desk can field questions in any language via our software. And the key here is that our software plugs into the client relationship management platform where the support agent is already working. So they don't have to do anything differently. We just expose a little translate button right next to the content that's coming in or to the content that they're sending out. And it all happens magically for them.
So this is a company that's not in Silicon Valley.
Nope, certainly not.
It's not in Boulder. It's not on the East Coast, although you do have offices in the East Coast.
We do.
It's headquartered right here in Wyoming.
It is.
Let's start, Heather, with what are the barriers to operating a business right here in Wyoming that's really a global now, you want global reach for your company?
Right. A lot of people ask, why are you in Wyoming? That doesn't make any sense for a software company. And certainly from a sales perspective, if we were trying to sell to companies in Wyoming, that would be a problem. But what I found about operating in Wyoming is the cost of living is much lower here. So hiring a developer in Wyoming is significantly less expensive than hiring a developer in Silicon Valley. Because we have a sales office in Boston, and because our focus is very much European focused right now, it works out well. But operating in Wyoming is great. I mean, Wyoming is a very business-friendly state. It's looking to attract more tech companies. And we have this relationship with the University of Wyoming through their Industrial Affiliates program that allows us to recruit software developers right out of college, and that's worked out really well for us.
And you find them to be competent and able to help from the get-go.
Absolutely.
So you're also a woman-owned company.
We are.
And that presents maybe some other hurdles, especially in the tech world. Not many tech companies are woman-owned.
Right.
Many tech companies have maybe a fifth of their workforce as women.
Right.
What are your thoughts about that, and how does it impact your day-to-day operations and also your longer-term plans?
Right. And yeah, as you said, there aren't a lot of tech companies that are women run. Only 3% of tech companies in the United States are actually launched by women, of startups. But as far as how that affects us day to day, it's hard to say. Here in Wyoming, I don't feel like it is as much of a barrier or hurdle as it might be, say, in Silicon Valley or even in the Denver Tech Center, because I've found Wyoming to be very welcoming of women in tech, much more so perhaps than I've seen in other parts of the country or in more populated areas where the networks are more established. So for example, I worked in the Denver Tech Center for a long time, and I just need to start by saying that I worked with many men who were great and very supportive, and I had no issues with. But there was definitely a sense that women in, especially software developers who are women in technology, get a little bit less respect perhaps than men, and aren't automatically given the credibility that a man might be given as a software developer. And also moving up in management and technology felt more difficult to me for a lot of reasons.
Recent article in the LA Times, the headline was, "Why Women Are Leaving Tech."
Yeah.
Two questions out of that. One, do you find it true that women who start in tech are leaving? And number two, is it tough for a young woman to get into the tech game, in your view?
Yeah, it is tough for a young woman to get into the tech game. And there are so many reasons for that.
That started in school, in college,
it does.
After graduation, or?
It does. It probably even starts before college, right? I mean, there are many studies indicating that women aren't encouraged in math, for example, and there are programs out there that are attempting to attract more women into math, and potentially that's where it begins. In college, definitely in the computer science department, there are so few women. When you go to those classes, you kind of feel like an outsider to begin with, even if there isn't any active hostility. But it's really the more subtle things that I think keep you out of it, or keep women from joining. And like I said, it's kind of when the men are viewed as having more credibility in a field, and you sense that when you're in a room full of mostly men, when you're not called on as much, or you're not viewed as credible as the guy sitting next to you. These are all detractors when it comes to wanting to stay in a program like that.
So what would you tell a high school junior girl relative to tech? Would you encourage them to learn how to become a developer, to learn how to code software, to learn how hardware works? Or would you say, you know what, this is a tough world for you. You got to look elsewhere. What would your advice be?
Oh, I would absolutely encourage more women to go into tech, software, high school juniors to just dive right in, and despite these subtle biases that they might feel, to just plow ahead, because if this is a field that you enjoy, for me, it's such a creative process. I love writing code. I love developing software. It's something that I truly enjoy. And I wouldn't encourage you to go into it if it's not something that you enjoy. But if it's something that you think that you would thrive in, then just push past those barriers, because it will change.
Back to your company, I think people might be surprised to learn your client list.
Right.
How long have you been at it? Who's your client list? And Where's Language I/O going?
Sure. So we've only been at it for a couple years, but within those couple years, we've developed an impressive client list. I mean, our clients include iRobot, SurveyMonkey, LinkedIn, Shutterstock, Cablevision, Cable One, many very large companies. And they are, by nature large companies because it's the larger companies that are going global, more or less. And we've had great success here in the United States because our software is something that is eminently usable. I mean, when you're going global and realizing the cost of ramping up a native speaking support desk in each country that you're going into, and you think, well, I could do that, or at least in the interim, I can implement this software that's going to allow my English speaking support desk to support folks anywhere. Why wouldn't you do that? So that it's a very logical pitch that we have to offer. As far as where we're headed, we've had success here in the United States, but we see Europe as very fertile territory from a sales perspective, because here in the United States, there's a huge market. It's a big country, and so companies don't always have to go global to meet the revenue goals that they have. Whereas in Europe, the countries are much smaller, and a company in France quite frequently has to attract clients in Germany, in Spain, in the Netherlands. So whenever we can get in front of a European company, the sales cycle is always much faster because they don't need to be sold on it. They completely understand what we have to offer and how useful it will be for them.
So here we are in downtown Cheyenne.
Right.
Can you grow the company? Can you grow it from right here?
Oh, absolutely.
How do you plan to do it?
So the distribution channel is what's going to be very important for us. We need to be able to sell faster without hiring more salespeople. That's really the goal, right? Because if the only way to scale the company is to hire more salespeople, that's really not scalable. So our strategy, the way we plan to move forward, is to enhance our existing partnerships with these client relationship management companies, such as Salesforce, such as Oracle Service Cloud, where our integrations already exist. And once we become kind of the default solution within these CRM platforms for multilingual customer support, the solution will likely just sell itself.
Let's talk a little bit. Let's get inside the technology.
Sure.
We have some time. I typed that question in Mandarin.
Yes.
And you read it in English.
Yes.
It is magic, but it's not magic. How does it happen?
Right. So we like it to look like magic for our customers. They don't need to be thinking about how it all happens. But what happens is the plugin that is ours and that sits right inside the CRM platform. Where
a button, if you will.
It's a button. It's a translate button, right? When you hit that button, it reaches out to our server, which is actually right here in Cheyenne with Greenhouse Data. Our server is like a very sophisticated brokering engine, and it determines, based upon the type of content that you've submitted for translation, how we should go about translating that content. So in some cases, it makes sense to use cheap and instantaneous machine translation. So in that case, our server will reach out via APIs programmatically.
Which are ways programs talk to one another
Exactly.
in the internet world.
Exactly. So reach out via APIs to a machine translation solution, perhaps Google Translate or something like that. We're connected with several. And then that machine translation goes back through our server, our sophisticated brokering engine, and into the CRM right in front of you, the support agent. In other cases where you've requested translation of a self-help article or a help article, this requires more sophisticated human linguists to translate your content. See, support articles are where a company really saves money in the area of customer support. Because if you need help and you're able to just find the information you're looking for in their knowledge base in a support article, that's going to be much less expensive for them than if you have to actually send an email or, God forbid, call them on the phone, right? So these support articles need to be translated perfectly. So we have linguists all over the world that we work with who will professionally translate these support articles. And so again, that brokering system will send it out to the human linguists in many cases instead, who can turn this content around very quickly. It's then passed back through our server and directly into the CRM. So the concept behind Linguist Now is that a support agent who speaks only English can author, support, or help articles in any language or respond to support questions in any language. So in this example, I'm working within the Salesforce Client Relationship Management Platform, which is the biggest CRM out there today. And let's say I'm an English-speaking support agent and I see all of these Japanese questions sitting in my inbox. And I need to reply to them. Because Linguist Now is installed inside of the Salesforce tools where I already work, I'm able to do this. So I'm going to jump into one of these Japanese questions, scroll down, and I see the question, and right next to it, I see our translate button. So I'm going to hit translate next to this Japanese question, and what's going to happen is the Linguist Now plugin installed in Salesforce reaches out to the Linguist Now server and requests a translation. In this case, because this translation is only going to me, the agent, it can be a machine translation because it doesn't need to be a perfect translation. I simply need to understand what's being asked. So here's the translation. It says, "Hello there. I will not be able to change my profile picture. Can you help me?" So it's not an amazing translation, but it's certainly good enough for me to reply. In cases where the machine translation isn't great or it's not good enough for me to actually understand and reply to the question, we always provide this little retranslate button right next to the translation. And if I hit retranslate, what's going to happen is our add-in inside of Salesforce is again going to reach out to our server and say, hey, this translation wasn't good enough. Please send us a fast human translation of the same content. And in that case, in under an hour, on average in 34 minutes, a human translation will be pushed right back into Salesforce. So in the end, I, the English-speaking agent, understand this Japanese question. So because I understand the question, I can move over to the email response tool provided by Salesforce, and I can provide my response. So I will say, yes, I can help you. Let me know if I can be of further assistance. Heather. Okay, so there's my response. It's in English still, but that's okay. I save my English response. My English response is saved inside of Salesforce and within Linguist Now. But at this point, I can hit the translate button right next to the email response tool. And again, Linguist Now inside of Salesforce reaches out to the Linguist Now server and says, I need a translation from English into Japanese. Now, because this is the response that's actually going to the customer, we generally configure Linguist Now to use a rapid turnaround human linguist to translate this response. They will translate it in under an hour. It's pushed right back into Salesforce. And as we'll see here, I can jump back into this email view and see that it has been translated into Japanese. And at this point, all I have to do is hit send email. And that Japanese customer sees a professionally translated human response as if I were a native Japanese speaker.
Obviously, these companies then don't need 100% one-on-one, a human on one side, a human on the other side to do that translation work. How have they responded to you and the value it's provided them to automate these processes? What feedback are you getting?
We're getting very clear feedback that this automation is saving them hundreds of thousands of dollars every year. And we can give you examples from a number of our clients who have given us the numbers themselves. And that's why once we get our product in with a customer, we've never lost a customer because there's no reason not to use it.
Later on in the program, we'll visit with Dr. Stefka, and she'll
Yes.
talk about the initial funding that you and her have negotiated and come up with together. But there's more funding that this company might be wanting to access in the future. Funding is always one of those barriers to growth. Is that part of your plan?
Absolutely. So currently, we're talking to investors. We're seeking $1 million in additional funding for our next phase of growth. And with that money, we would establish a presence in Europe, likely, in London. It will be important for us to have an office there when we're selling into companies all over Europe. And to further the distribution channel I was talking to you about, to better partner with these CRM platforms where we are already integrated to become that default multilingual support solution.
So what is your growth timetable, if
Yes.
you will, Heather? Yeah.
We'd like to see all of this happen sometime this year, at least the initial steps to establishing our European presence and strengthening our partnerships.
Every good business has competitors.
Yes.
Do you have competitors, and how do you compete? Again, recognizing you're in Wyoming,
right?
And they may not be.
Right. So we do have competitors, but they're not direct competitors because nobody does exactly what we do. A competitor might be a localization company or a company that is more of a translation service provider company and who has an integration into one of the platforms where we are. But whereas we have this sophisticated brokering mechanism that reaches out to many translation services, their integration would only integrate with their own translation services, so they're not going to be nearly as flexible as we are. And we're the only ones that provide this true hybrid of machine translation, rapid turnaround human translation, slower, higher quality human translation, based upon the type of support content that is being translated. And we're the only ones who focus on support content in this realm.
In your history, Heather, have you had mentors? Have you had folks that have guided you and excited you about getting to where you are today?
Certainly I have. I have to think back to graduate school and some of the professors there who did encourage me as a woman to go into technology. The University of Colorado, where I completed graduate school, there were a few. I think of David Menarche. He was my database instructor, and he was very encouraging despite the fact that there were really no women going into these classes, to encourage me to move ahead and do that.
So you were in classes where you were one of the few, if not the only, woman in your class?
Certainly. There were always a couple of us. I don't recall being the only woman in these classes, but as you get into the higher levels, they certainly weed out a few.
I think women don't want to be stereotyped as that nerd that wants to hang out and dig deep into computer architecture or computer software programming. That's part of the issue there. The stereotype of what it means to really be a computer geek, if you will.
Right.
Is that part of the problem?
Possibly, because certainly if you are a woman in college and you're looking to, do what's cool, going into engineering is not necessarily the path, but I think that's changing because, tech is the most lucrative field you can go into right now. So women are seeing that just like men are, and I think they're likely to be attracted to it. And you said something about mentors, and I want to go back a little bit because not just people that I know have been my mentors, but back in the late 90s, I started reading a lot of speculative fiction and science fiction written by folks like William Gibson and Neil Stephenson, and even to some extent, more traditional science fiction like Ursula Le Guin. And I want to say that's really what intrigued me, and I thought, well, this is the future. I need to find out what this is all about, and computer programming sounds fascinating. So.
Heather Morgan Schumaker from Language.io, not in the Silicon Valley, but here in Cheyenne, Wyoming. Thank you very much for joining us on Wyoming Chronicle.
Thank you, Craig.